Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio, and I am glad to be here. It is Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Calgary, Alberta time, and April 26th. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, and it's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open. You're welcome to go sit in the chat room, and I have some guests in there already, and that's just awesome. And tonight's topic is domestic violence and abuse. We're going to continue on with that. We started talking about that on Sunday. It's an article I found from helpguide.org, and you can pull that article up yourself at http helpguide, helpguide.org, helpguide.org. And there's some great information on there regarding really everything regarding life's issues. Like helpguide.org, it says here, understand, prevent, and resolve life's challenges. And there's all kinds of information there regarding child abuse, drug addiction, stress management, coping with stress and trauma. And then, of course, there's this domestic violence and abuse article. And I really like that website. I use it a lot. I go on there and I learn so much from it. And so I highly recommend it for anybody who's just searching out for information for just about anything you can think of. Post-traumatic stress disorder, just about everything is there. And it's worth taking a look at. It's a great website. And, so I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that you can join in. And it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. I'm just a person who does this. I pay to do my own blog talk show because I really think the issues surrounding child abuse, as much as there's people out there talking about it, thank God, there's not enough people talking about it. And we really need everyone's voice, every single person to get involved and stand up and make some changes here for these children today and for tomorrow, and the next generation, because child abuse is an epidemic, and most of it's not reported. But even what we're seeing with the reports and the statistics, it's way too many children are losing their lives at the hands of parents and caregivers, and way too many children are, if they don't lose their lives, end up in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, and that's every kind of abuse you can think of, physical, emotional, psychological, verbal, sexual. I mean, you name it. It's horrible. It's got to stop. Kids are counting on us, really. They're counting on us to make change and make this happen and to stop child abuse, prevent child abuse. So I just want to do more out there, just get involved with. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me now. I don't know. I had some technical difficulties there. My show got dropped, and so I was off the air for just a bit there. Sorry about that. So, to continue on, I just think everyone should listen at their own discretion. And, if the topics of abuse bother you, then please just turn the show off, and because no one, should be uncomfortable, right? And also, if you're a young person under the age of 18, make sure you have an adult listen to this with you, because a lot of the very, it's adult-oriented, and also it's very sensitive, and I think that young people might have questions. They won't know where to go to get the answers. So it's a good idea to have someone listen to this with you. And just the whole issue of child online safety. You want to make sure you keep yourself safe online, and that's just a huge issue. So that's the whole thing. You want to make sure you stay safe online and let adults know what you're actually listening to, so that they can, help you and just sort of make sure that you're safe online, right? There's so many child sexual predators out there looking to get a hold of people. So that's the whole thing. I just think everyone should keep themselves safe online and make sure it's okay for you to be listening to this show. So we'll get right on into it. We have about 20 minutes left. And this article we started, like I said, Sunday, Domestic Violence and Abuse, Signs of Abuse and Abusive Relationships. And this is a great article. It goes into all kinds of great information regarding domestic violence and abuse, and looking at understanding domestic violence and abuse. It's about control. It's about it has most of it is regarding the issue of control, and an abuser doesn't play fair. Abusers use fear, guilt, shame, and intimidation to wear you down and keep you under their thumb. Your abuser may also threaten you, hurt you, or hurt those around you. I'm just reading right from the page here. It says domestic violence and abuse does not discriminate. It happens among heterosexual couples, in same-sex partnerships. It occurs within all age ranges, ethnic backgrounds, and financial levels. And while women are more commonly victimized, men are also abused, especially verbally and emotionally. And so, we can see it just doesn't play favorites, right? Domestic violence and abuse really affects us all, and it doesn't matter who you are, right? It could be your aunt, or it could be your grandmother, or mother or sister. It could be your brother-in-law, your neighbor down the street. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. It's so horrific, really, what we see going on as far as the reports in the paper and reports on the news of domestic violence and abuse situations getting out of control, and then people losing their lives, due to an abusive relationship, right? To one of the partners ends up killing the other, and sometimes the children are killed as well, and it's just horrible. And I just think it's a huge epidemic. It's a huge problem. It's not only in North America, but all around the world. And so, we need to start looking at this and start looking at ways that we can help to prevent this. And if you're in a domestic violence, situation, and you're living in an abusive home, you want to make sure that if your life is being threatened, that you do the right thing and get help, right? And, get out. If your life is being threatened, you owe it to yourself to save your life. If your children's lives are being threatened, then you want to make sure that you save your children and get out, get out of that abusive relationship. And it says, recognizing abuse is the first step to getting help. Domestic abuse often escalates from threats and verbal abuse to physical violence and even murder. And while physical injury may be the most obvious danger, the emotional and psychological consequences of domestic abuse are also severe. No one deserves this kind of pain, and your first step to breaking free is recognizing that your situation is abusive. Once you acknowledge the reality of the abusive situation, then you can get the help you need. It says you don't have to live in fear. If you are afraid for your safety or have been beaten by your partner, dial 911 or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-787-3224. And, that's just the whole thing, right? If your life is in danger and you're being mistreated and abused, then you have to get help. As an adult, we have that choice. Now, children, the whole issue, is the fact that children just, they just can't protect themselves, right? But as an adult, we do have the option, and sometimes the option of leaving, just doesn't seem like the thing to do, right? Because it's like, well, where would I go? And, how would I live? And there's just all these issues come up. But if your life is being threatened, you wouldn't be living very long in that abusive relationship, right? So it's almost better to suffer through for a while in a shelter somewhere or at someone's home or, in a setting like that than it is to stay in an abusive relationship and end up dead and in the morgue. So the whole idea is to keep yourself safe and keep yourself alive, and that's just so important, right? And it says here, signs of an abusive relationship. There are many signs of an abusive relationship. The most telling sign is fear of your partner. If you feel like you have to walk on eggshells around your partner, constantly what to do in order to avoid a blow-up, chances are your relationship is unhealthy and abusive. Other signs that you may be in an abusive relationship include a partner who belittles you or tries to control you, and feelings of self-loathing. And it says here, helplessness and desperation. So to determine whether your relationship is abusive, answer the questions below. The more yes answers, the more likely it is that you're in an abusive relationship. And then they have this little section here called signs that you're in an abusive relationship. And there's one section that's called your inner thoughts and feelings. There's another section called your partner's violent behavior or threats. And another one, your partner's belittling behavior, and also your partner's controlling behavior. And then they list a whole bunch of stuff here, and the more things that you can say yes to, that means the more likely that you're in an abusive relationship. So we'll read through some of those. Your inner thoughts and feelings. It says, do you feel afraid much of the time? Do you avoid certain topics out of fear of angering your partner? Do you feel that you can't do anything right for your partner? And do you believe that you deserve to be hurt or mistreated? And do you wonder if you're the one who is crazy? And do you feel emotionally numb or helpless? So if you can answer yes to those questions, or some of those questions, the more you can answer yes to, the more likely that you're in an abusive relationship, right? And your partner's violent behavior or threats. Here's some other questions here. Does your partner have a bad and unpredictable temper? Does your partner hurt you or threaten to hurt you or kill you? Does your partner threaten to take your children away or harm them? Does your partner threaten to commit suicide if you leave? And does your partner force you to have sex? Does your partner destroy your belongings? That's definite signs of abuse, and if you can answer yes to even one of those, I would say that that's a real problem. But I've seen it myself. I've seen it firsthand. I grew up in a home that was full of domestic violence and abuse. I had friends growing up as we got older, and they had boyfriends and stuff. I saw a lot of domestic abuse there. I saw a lot of domestic violence in my friends' parents' homes. Certain parents with a lot of domestic issues and problems, domestic violence and abuse, and it's just horrible. When you grow up around that, as I'm a secondhand victim of domestic violence, and it's hard to grow up around that, and the adults in the situation are really, they have the choice, right? The really no one should be abused, and no one should have to live a life of fear and taking this abuse all the time, right? And then thinking, well, I don't have a choice, right? What else would I do, right? Well, the children don't have a choice, but the adults do. And sadly, too many children die at the hands of caregivers and parents, but they don't have really the choice of walking out, because most of these deaths occur under the age of 4 years old. But the thing is these adults in this situation, they have a choice to leave. And although it might be very hard out there on the street, because we already know that it is hard to get help, it's hard to get through the it's hard to find, shelters and places that aren't overcrowded, and it's just crazy, the situation with domestic violence and abuse. But the thing is, it's better to take your chances and stay alive than it is to stay in a situation that's that where your life is being threatened, right? So that's why I just encourage people to not stay if your life is being threatened, to make sure you get some help, right? So important, because it's just sad what you see in the paper. I study human rights and child rights, and I'm always researching and looking in the paper. I'm also the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and so therefore I'm studying and looking all the time into child abuse issues, and of course there's generally some domestic violence issues there as well, and you just see it all the time, and people are losing their lives daily, on a daily basis, and kids are dying every day due to domestic violence and child abuse, and it's just horrible. And so if you're one of those people, make sure you get yourself some help. Don't stay and suffer and be abused. It's horrible. And your children, if you have children in that situation, people have to do the right thing and get their children to safety, and get their children to, even if it's hard at first, you have a chance at a better life, right? Instead of just suffering along in a horrible relationship of, full of abuse, and then eventually it just wears people down, and they break down, and they no longer feel that they're worth anything, and that they even deserve a good life, And that's what happened in my family's case. The abuse went on for so many years that my mom, we'd tell her to leave, and like my older brothers especially would tell her to leave, just pack up and go, and even just leave the kids with my dad, whatever, but just for her to get out, right? Because we all cared about her very much, and she wouldn't go, and she wouldn't listen to us. And even later on in life, I told her, I would move out with her and help her out and stuff, and she still wouldn't go. And what do you do in that situation, right? When my mother was abused as a child as well, so she was an abused child, went into an abusive marriage, and then turned around and abused us, right? So just pass the cycle right on. So this is what happens to people, right? And their self-esteem and self-worth really, it's just lost. They lose it, and they don't know how to get it back. And she really needed help, and she needed someone to come along and to sort of take over the situation and help her to see that she really needed that she should have gotten out like way before, and then she could have had a good life, and we could have all gone with her, and we would have had some help, and then, things would have been a lot different. But unfortunately, she never did, and she just spent her whole life miserable in a marriage that she was very unhappy in. And, there was just a lot of abuse, and especially when they were younger, a lot of violence and abuse, and it's just horrible to see people ruin their lives like that, and when they don't have to. There's no reason to stay with somebody who's whether they're physically killing you or emotionally or psychologically killing you, right? It's the same thing. It's just bad. It's so bad. So I would encourage everybody to get some help, right? And it says, here's the next part. Your partner's belittling behavior. So if we can answer yes to any of these questions, then we can pretty much guess that we are in an abusive relationship. It says, does your partner humiliate you or yell at you? Does your partner criticize you and put you down? Does your partner treat you so badly that you're embarrassed for your friends or family to see? Does your partner ignore or put down your opinions or accomplishments? Does your partner blame you for his own abusive behavior? Does your partner see you as property or a sex object rather than a person? So if we can answer yes to those, then we can pretty much say, yes, we're in an abusive relationship. And also, your partner's controlling behavior. Does your partner act excessively jealous and possessive? Does your partner control where you go or what you do? Does your partner keep you from seeing your friends or family? Does your partner limit your access to money, the phone, or the car? And does your partner constantly check up on you? So those are the questions that they ask for signs that you're in an abusive relationship. And if we can answer yes to, any number of those questions, we can pretty much say there's some abuse going on there, right? Because that's very abusive behavior. All of that is abuse, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, right? And it's all about controlling that person and making them do what they want them to do out of fear. It's fear-based control. And I'll continue reading on here in this article. It says, physical violence is just one form of domestic abuse. When people think of domestic abuse, they often picture battered women who have been physically assaulted. But not all domestic abuse involves violence. Just because you're not battered and bruised doesn't mean you're not being abused. Domestic abuse takes many forms, including psychological, emotional, and sexual abuse. These types of abuse are less obvious than physical abuse, but that doesn't mean they're not damaging. In fact, these types of domestic abuse can be even more harmful, so often overlooked, even by the person being abused. Emotional or psychological abuse. The aim of emotional or psychological abuse is to chip away at your feelings of self-worth and independence. If you're the victim of emotional abuse, you may feel that there is no way out of the relationship, or that without your abusive partner you have nothing. Emotional abuse includes verbal abuse such as yelling, name-calling, blaming and shaming. Isolation, intimidation, and controlling behavior also fall under emotional abuse. Additionally, abusers who use emotional or psychological abuse often throw in threats of physical violence. You may think that physical abuse is far worse than emotional abuse, since physical violence can send you to the hospital and leave you with scars. But the scars of emotional abuse are very real and they run deep. In fact, emotional abuse can be just as damaging as physical abuse, sometimes even more so. Furthermore, emotional abuse usually worsens over time, often escalating to physical battery. And that's it's just horrible. My family was very emotionally abusive towards all of us, and my dad as well. And my dad was very emotionally and psychologically abusive to her and us, and including physical violence as well from both my parents. And it was just ridiculous. It was so out of control. And the sad part is that, we had an intervention done when I was a toddler, and nothing was done. We were not removed from the home. My parents were told to go to, they had court-ordered counseling, or we'd be removed from the home. They went twice, and that's it. And then we moved out of the country, and that was it. And, so my parents were very good at continuing on to do it. They were very good at keeping going this whole life of abuse, right? It's almost like they were just determined to ruin each other's lives, right? Well, my mom later on said that the reason she stayed in the marriage was that she wanted to make my dad's life hell, and she wanted to hurt him. You know what I mean? So she did everything that she could, but in the meantime, she was hurting us, right? So she was hurting everybody, right, including herself, by staying in that marriage, right? Horrible, just absolutely horrible. Sexual abuse. is common in abusive relationships. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all battered women are raped by their partner at least once during their relationship. Any situation in which you are forced to participate in unwanted, unsafe, or degrading sexual activity is sexual abuse. Forced sex, even by a spouse or intimate partner with whom you also have consensual sex, is an act of aggression and violence. Furthermore, women whose partners abuse them physically and sexually are at a higher risk of being seriously injured or killed. And that's just a fact. My mother was a victim of rape. I was born out of rape. That's why my mom was so abusive towards me. And she didn't want to have all those kids. She ended up with 7 kids. There would have been 9, but 2 were born stillborn. Who knows how many more she probably lost in the meantime between that, the whole time, right? There could have been more. She was because my dad was just forcing himself on her, right? So she was being raped, and I mean, it's just ridiculous what people do to each other, and horrible what, two people enter into a marriage, and they're supposed to love each other, and they're supposed to protect each other and take care of each other, and they end up trying to kill each other. I mean, this is just ridiculous. That's when okay, it's time to quit this thing. You know what I mean? It's like it should be about love and care, putting the other person first, and putting the children first, and let's look after each other, protect each other. And there's going to be the odd disagreements. No family's perfect, but we're talking it has to come from the heart. You have to really care about your partner and not want to hurt them. You know what I mean? Or your children, right? But that's what we're not seeing that, right? By the reports in the paper, we're seeing that people have a lot of problems, emotional problems, psychological problems, substance abuse problems. Anger management issues, right? Might have been abused themselves as young people, never got any help and passed it on. That's what my mom did. It's just horrible to see families destroyed by domestic violence and abuse, and so that's why I'm just want to keep talking about it, because I think the more we talk about it, the more we're going to find the answers to. Really, it's all about funding. It's all about education and awareness. It's about getting the word out regarding domestic violence, child abuse, and whatnot. Awareness is huge, because the public will only direct where the funds go if they know what the problem is, and the lawmakers will only do what the public tell them to do. So the funding goes where the public tells it to go. And if everyone stands up and says, look, we need more money put into this thing, we need more money put into shelters for women, we need better foster care situations for children that are removed from their homes so that they don't have to go into another abusive situation, we need something happening here. We also need better situation for parents. There's lots of right now, especially in the United States, that I've seen, that they've got some great programs in place for high-risk youth in certain areas around the country, and they're doing these programs where they're starting to work with children and starting to work with parents who have been at least one time there's been a situation where abuse has been reported, and CPS or DHS or whoever steps in, and then that's when they this new program, it's not new anymore, it's probably 10 years old, but they step in and they go through this program with these people, and they actually help these people to learn how to cope, and the success rate is awesome. It's amazing, and it's because these families need help. It's because they're getting the help that they need, right? And so the children are no longer abused, and everybody's getting the help that they need, and the parents are happy because they're not so stressed out and they're not hurting their children, and they're getting help that they need because they were suffering, and that's why they were hurting their children. It's just there has to be a way to do it, but there has to be enough people talking about it and getting some great ideas out there and getting the funding for it. And the funding's only going to go where people tell it to go, the general public, right? So the general public needs to hear about child abuse, especially child abuse, because children can't stand up for themselves, and also issues like, for instance, domestic violence and domestic abuse, right? Because where there's children involved, then they are going to be affected by it. So that's why it's so important, right? We have about a minute left, and sorry about the technical difficulties there. I'm so glad that you could tune in. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I hope that you will check their website out. We have a great website. It's http dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, and there's great information on there regarding all kinds of stuff that you need to know about child abuse, signs and symptoms, first of all, and how to report it. That's so important. There's a proper way to report child abuse. If you don't report it properly, the child can end up back in the home, and then the abuse will just continue, or they could lose their lives. So important to know how to report child abuse. And if you suspect child abuse, report it. That's the most important thing. It's the law, and child abuse is against the law. It's the law to report it, so make sure that you do. And you could save a child's life. And so thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care. I'll be on tomorrow night as co-host of Dreamcatchers Talk Radio on Blog Talk Radio called Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you'll join us. It's Donna Shear, president and best-selling author. She's the president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she's going to be on there. I'll be co-hosting. We'll be on for half an hour, and this is going to be a great show, and I hope you will tune in and join us live over there. And so, yeah, take care, everybody. Have a great night. I'm so glad that you could stop in and be here with me, and thanks, everybody. I appreciate all the support. I have about 4,000 shows listened to, and I can't tell you what that means to me. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening and being here with me this whole time. And, I've done almost 200 shows now, and I just thank you all so much for being here and for being part of my life. I really appreciate the support. And have a great night, everybody. Be safe and take care.